In the vastness of space, the hegemony ruled with an iron fist. For 3,000 years they had conquered countless worlds, forcing every race they encountered to submit to their will. The hegemony was powerful, and their reputation for brutality spread like wildfire. There were many species that had learned to kneel, believing that survival meant giving up their pride. But for others, the thought of submission was a bitter pill to swallow. Aboard the gigantic hegemony dreadnought, the Eternal Dominion, Supreme Admiral Kethfer prepared for yet another ritual of submission. Today, representatives from the aquatic Myrthany civilization stood before him. They were tall and graceful, their bodies shimmering with the colors of the ocean. As they approached the platform, their eyes filled with fear and desperation. They knew the consequences of defiance all too well. Admiral Kethfer, a massive creature covered in dark scales, regarded the Myrthany with a cold, calculating gaze. He had seen this ritual countless times, and it never failed to amuse him. The hegemony had perfected the art of intimidation, and he relished the power he wielded over these lesser beings. He raised his hand, signaling for silence. "Before you stands the might of the hegemony," Kethfer proclaimed, his voice booming like thunder. "You have a choice. Kneel before us and submit to our rule, or face annihilation. Choose wisely, for the consequences of defiance are dire." As he spoke, the Myrthany representatives exchanged fearful glances. They had heard the stories of those who resisted the hegemony, entire civilizations wiped from existence, their homeworlds reduced to ashes. The thought of such devastation haunted them, but surrendering meant losing their identity, their dignity. The tension in the air was palpable as the Admiral waited for their response. Meanwhile, light years away, the human exploration vessel Endeavour drifted silently through the stars. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, gazing out at the vastness of space. She was a skilled pilot and a former military officer, now leading a diverse crew on humanity's first deep space mission. They had ventured far beyond the familiar territories of Earth, driven by a thirst for discovery. Little did they know, their journey was about to take a dangerous turn. As the Endeavour approached the edge of the Kepler 442 system, alarms suddenly blared. The ship's systems detected the looming presence of the hegemony fleet. Sarah's heart raced as she quickly assessed the situation. On the screens, she saw the enormous dreadnoughts and warships surrounding the Myrthany. It was a display of power that left no room for doubt. The hegemony was here, and they were ready to conquer yet another world. "Captain, we need to turn back," shouted Chief Security Officer Thompson, his voice filled with urgency. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. It's too dangerous." But Sarah refused to back down. She knew that turning away would mean abandoning the Myrthany to their fate. "No," she replied firmly. "We can't leave them. We have to do something." The crew exchanged worried looks, torn between loyalty to their captain and the fear of facing the hegemony. Sarah understood their concerns, but she felt a deep sense of responsibility. Humanity had always prided itself on its courage and resilience. They were explorers, not conquerors, and she believed they had a chance to make a difference. As Sarah pondered her options, the hegemony's ultimatum echoed across the stars. "Submit or be destroyed," Kethfer's voice resonated, cold and unyielding. The Myrthany representatives stood trembling, their bodies quaking with fear. They were faced with a choice that could decide their fate. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Myrthany leader stepped forward, his voice trembling but filled with resolve. "We refuse to kneel," he declared, his words shaking, the very foundation of the ritual. The silence that followed was deafening. No one in the galaxy had ever dared to defy the hegemony so openly. Supreme Admiral Kethfer's eyes narrowed, and a flash of anger crossed his face. This was an unprecedented act of defiance that could not go unpunished. As he raised his hand to issue the order for destruction, the crew of the Endeavour watched in disbelief. Realizing that everything was about to change, Captain Sarah Chen felt a spark of hope ignite within her. One refusal could alter the course of history, and humanity was ready to stand against tyranny. As the Myrthany leader's bold declaration echoed across the vastness of space, Tense silence fell upon the gathered representatives of the hegemony. Supreme Admiral Kethver, taken aback by the unexpected defiance, quickly regained his composure. His reptilian eyes narrowed, and a wave of fury washed over him. How dare these lesser beings challenge the might of the hegemony? I've seen civilizations crumble under the weight of their own fear, and now this was an affront that could not. Go unanswered, execute them, Kethver ordered, his voice cold and commanding. Show the galaxy what happens to those who refuse the hegemony. The command was transmitted throughout the hegemony fleet, and the ships moved into position, their weapons primed and ready. The Myrthani stood frozen, their faces pale as they realized the gravity of their choice, had chosen pride over survival, and now it seemed they would pay the ultimate price. Meanwhile, aboard the Endeavor, Captain Sarah Chen watched the unfolding events on her ship's monitors. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. The destruction of a helpless civilization played out before her eyes, and she could not bear the thought of standing idly by. She turned to her crew, who were equally horrified by the sight. "Can't let this happen," Sarah declared, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding outside. "We have to intervene. We must try to save them." "Captain, we're outmanned and outgunned," Chief Security Officer Thompson protested, glancing nervously at the massive hegemony fleet. "It's suicide to engage them directly." "If we do nothing, we're just letting them die," Sarah shot back. "We have to at least try. We owe it to them." The crew exchanged uncertain looks, but something in Sarah's conviction sparked hope within them. They were human explorers, not warriors, but the thought of allowing an entire civilization to perish was unbearable. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart as she considered their options. "Communications, can we establish a connection with the hegemony flagship?" she asked, turning her gaze toward Communications Officer Park. Park nodded, quickly working at her console. "I'll try to get us a channel. It's a long shot, but we might be able to appeal to their sense of reason." As Park worked, Sarah felt a surge of nerves and excitement. This was not just about saving the Myrthani. It was about humanity's first contact with the galaxy. It was about standing up against tyranny, even when the odds were stacked against them. After a moment, Park turned to Sarah, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. "We have a connection to the hegemony flagship," they're responding. "Put it on screen," Sarah ordered, her heart pounding in her chest. The screen flickered, and soon the imposing figure of Admiral Kethver appeared. His scaled face twisted into a sneer as he regarded the human ship. "What do you want, human?" he growled, his voice dripping with disdain. "We are the crew of the Endeavor," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the Admiral's intimidating presence. "We wish to speak on behalf of the Myrthani. They do not deserve to be destroyed for their choice." Kethver's eyes narrowed further. "You dare speak for them? They chose defiance over submission. They chose death. They chose dignity." Sarah countered, her voice firm. "And they deserve a chance to live. Strength does not come from oppression, Admiral. It comes from understanding and cooperation." For a moment there was silence. Kethver's expression was unreadable, but Sarah could sense the tension in the air. The Admiral's face contorted in a mixture of anger and confusion. He was not accustomed to being challenged like this, especially by a mere human. "I will not waste time on your foolish ideals," he finally replied, his voice cold and dismissive. "Prepare to witness the consequences of their choice." With that, Kethver cut the transmission, and the screen went dark. Sarah felt a wave of despair wash over her. The time for words was running out, and the Myrthani were still in grave danger. "Set a course for the hegemony flagship," Sarah commanded, her determination renewed. "We may not have the firepower, but we have to show them that humanity will not stand by while others suffer. Prepare to engage their shields with our disruptors." The crew sprang into action, fueled by a newfound sense of purpose. As they maneuvered the Endeavor closer to the hegemony flagship, Sarah felt a surge of hope. They might be small and outmatched, but they were determined to make a stand. Today they would show the galaxy that humanity was willing to fight for freedom, no matter the odds. As the Endeavor closed the distance to the hegemony flagship, Captain Sarah Chen felt a mix of adrenaline and fear coursing through her veins. The crew was tense, knowing they were about to engage in a battle against a vastly superior force. They had no idea what would happen next, but they were determined to make their stand. "Captain, we're within range of their shields," reported Lieutenant Park, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Initiating disruptor fire. Now, hold. On tight, everyone," Sarah shouted, gripping the armrests of her chair. The ship shuddered as the disruptor beams fired toward the hegemony flagship. The energy burst struck the massive ship's shields, now creating a dazzling display of light, but it barely scratched the surface. HFY, watching from his command center, was momentarily taken aback. He had expected the human vessel to flee, not engage. What are they doing? He wondered, a mix of annoyance and curiosity flickering in his eyes as the Endeavor continued its assault. Sarah quickly assessed the situation. The hegemony flagship was still operational, and the other ships in the fleet were beginning to turn toward them. "We need to create a distraction," she said, thinking fast. "Can we use the ship's thrusters to initiate a sharp turn?" "Great idea," Thompson replied, a spark of excitement in his voice. "It might buy us some time. Do it," Sarah commanded. "To prepare to send a distress signal to any nearby human ships. We need reinforcements, and we need them now." The crew worked quickly. The Endeavor executed a sharp maneuver, using its thrusters to pivot and make it more difficult for the hegemony ships to lock on. The sudden movement caught the hegemony off guard, and for a moment they hesitated, unsure of how to respond to this unexpected tactic. As the human ship spun, Lieutenant Park sent out a distress signal. "Mayday, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Endeavor. We are under attack by the hegemony fleet near Kepler 442, requesting immediate assistance." The message spread through the stars, reaching any human ships that might be in the vicinity. Meanwhile, the hegemony fleet began to regroup, their focus shifting back to the audacious little ship that dared to challenge their might. "Prepare to fire at will," HFY barked, regaining his composure. He could not let this act of defiance go unpunished. The hegemony ships unleashed a rain of laser fire toward the Endeavor, illuminating the darkness of space with deadly flashes. Thompson shouted, "Brace for impact." The crew held on as the ship rocked under the force of the incoming blasts. Sarah gritted her teeth, determined to keep her crew safe and make every moment count. "Reinforce the shields and power up the engines," she ordered. "We need to. Stay mobile." As the Endeavor maneuvered through the hegemony fire, Sarah's mind raced. She knew they were fighting against impossible odds, but she also felt a flicker of hope. They were human, and they had something that the hegemony did not: determination and creativity. Just then, the ship's sensors detected a faint blip on the radar. "Captain, we have incoming ships," Park exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. "It looks like they're human." A surge of relief swept through Sarah. Reinforcements had arrived just in time. "What ships are they?" she asked quickly. "It's the Fury and the Valor. They're responding to our distress signal." Park replied, her voice filled with excitement. As the two human ships entered the fray, they opened fire on the nearest hegemony vessels. The tide of battle shifted as the combined forces of the Endeavor, Fury, and Valor pushed back against the overwhelming hegemony fleet. The sound of explosions filled the air as the hegemony ships began to falter. HFY growled in frustration. Realizing that the rebellion was gaining momentum, regrouped the fleet. "We cannot allow these humans to gain the upper hand." Barked orders, but the damage had already been done. The sight of human ships fighting back reignited a spark of hope in the hearts of the Myrthani, and other species watching from afar. As the battle raged on, Sarah felt a surge of determination. They were no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for freedom. With each blast fired and every maneuver executed, they were sending a clear message across the galaxy. Humanity would not back down, and their refusal to kneel would become a rallying cry for all those who yearned for liberation. With the tide of battle turning, Sarah knew they had a chance. Together with their new allies, they could make a stand against the oppressive hegemony. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was ready to ignite the spark of rebellion that would change everything. As the battle raged in the depths of space, the Endeavor, Fury, and Valor fought valiantly against the hegemony fleet. The sight of human ships working together inspired hope not only in their crews, but also in countless beings across the galaxy. The Myrthani watched from their ship, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. For the first time in centuries, they saw a glimmer of resistance against the hegemony's tyranny. Back on Earth, the news of the unexpected battle reached the United Earth Assembly. President Maria Santos stood in front of a large screen displaying live feeds from the front lines. She felt a surge of pride and urgency as she watched the brave actions of Captain Sarah Chin and her crew unfold. The fight against the hegemony was no longer just about saving the Myrthani. It was about standing up for freedom across the galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, President Santos began addressing the assembly. Today, we witness the courage of our people in the face of oppression. The Endeavor and our other ships are fighting against impossible odds, but they do not fight alone. They fight for all of us, for every species that has suffered under the hegemony's rule. The assembly chamber buzzed with energy as representatives from various human colonies listened. Intently, they understood the stakes involved. This was not just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the very soul of humanity. More than ever, they felt the need to unite against their common enemy. General Marcus Webb, the head of Earth's military, stood up. We cannot let this moment pass us by. We must mobilize every available ship and resource to support Captain Chen and her crew. If they can stand against the hegemony, then so can we. The assembly erupted into applause. The call for unity echoed in the hearts of every representative. They began discussing plans to send reinforcements and resources to aid the Endeavor and its allies. The spirit of cooperation surged as they recognized that humanity's strength lay in their ability to come together. Meanwhile, back in the heat of battle, Sarah Chen was doing everything she could to keep the momentum going. The Endeavor had sustained some damage, but her crew was determined. "We need to keep pushing forward," she shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "Thompson, coordinate with the Fury and Valor. We need to strike at their command ship." Thompson nodded, quickly relaying orders to the other ships. "Fury, Valor, let's form a defensive triangle around the Endeavor and prepare for an attack on the flagship." As the three ships moved in formation, Sarah felt a newfound sense of purpose. They were no longer just defending. They were attacking, reclaiming their dignity and fighting for their existence. The hegemony fleet was beginning to falter under the combined pressure of the human ships, their formations breaking as they tried to regroup. "Captain, we have incoming ships on our sensors," Park exclaimed. "It looks like more hegemony vessels are arriving from the nearby sector." "Of course they are," Sarah replied, gritting her teeth. "They won't let us get away that easily. We need to make our move now." With a deep breath, Sarah focused on the flagship of the hegemony. It loomed large ahead, its dark hull a symbol of oppression. She knew that taking it down would send a powerful message to the entire galaxy. "All ships, prepare to fire on my mark," she commanded. As the ships lined up for the attack, Sarah's heart raced. This was the moment that could change everything. 3, 2, fire. The combined firepower of the human ships struck the hegemony flagship with overwhelming force. Brilliant flashes of light erupted as the energy beams met their target. The flagship shuddered under the assault, its shields flickering and failing. Kethfer, watching from the command center, felt a wave of panic. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. "Reinforcements. Now," he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. The tide of battle had already shifted. The sight of human ships standing together, refusing to back down, inspired fear in the hearts of his crew as the flagship began to take damage. The hegemony fleet started to lose cohesion. The once mighty armada was faltering, and the morale of the hegemony forces began to crumble. The humans were proving that they could fight back, and that defiance was a powerful weapon. Back on Earth, the assembly continued to watch the battle unfold. The spirit of unity among humanity was growing stronger than ever. They were ready to join the fight, ready to support their brave explorers in the stars. The spark of rebellion had ignited, and it would not be extinguished easily. Together, they would stand against tyranny and fight for their freedom no matter the cost. The battle in the Kepler 442 system raged on, a chaotic dance of ships exchanging fire and defiance. Captain Sarah Chen and her crew aboard the Endeavour were pushing the hegemony fleet to its limits. The sight of their flagship taking heavy damage sent ripples of hope through the hearts of the human forces. But with each passing moment, the reality of the situation grew more dire. Reinforcements from the hegemony were arriving, and their numbers were vast. Captain, more hegemony ships are entering the system, shouted Lieutenant Park, her voice laced with tension. They're flanking us from the starboard side. Sarah gritted her teeth, knowing they were outnumbered. We need to hold our ground, she urged, her heart racing, signaled the Fury, and Valor to fall back to a defensive position around us. We can't let them surround us. The Fury, commanded by Captain Alara Jansen, quickly adjusted course, moving in close to the Endeavour. The Valor followed suit, its weapons ready to defend against the oncoming hegemony ships. Sarah felt a sense of camaraderie with her fellow captains. They were all in this fight together, united against a common enemy, as the hegemony ships advanced. Kethfer watched with growing frustration. His flagship had sustained significant damage, but he refused to show weakness. Reinforce the front lines, he barked. We will crush this human rebellion once and for all. The hegemony ships began to close in, firing their weapons with relentless precision. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, and Sarah could feel the vibrations of incoming blasts, shaking her ship. Shields holding at 70%, reported Thompson, his eyes glued to the readouts. Prepare the disruptors for another round of fire, Sarah commanded. We need to hit them hard before they regroup, just as they were about to. Fire again. The Endeavour's sensors detected a surge of energy from the hegemony flagship. Captain, they're charging their main weapon, Park shouted, panic rising in her voice. Evasive maneuvers. Now, Sarah ordered, gripping the edge of her console. The Endeavour veered sharply to the left, dodging a massive energy beam that sliced through the space where they had just been. The blast struck one of the approaching hegemony ships, causing it to explode in a spectacular flash. Direct hit. Nice work, Captain. Thompson cheered, but Sarah knew they couldn't celebrate yet. The hegemony fleet was still coming. They needed to find a way to turn the tide. As the battle continued, Sarah's mind raced. They needed to find a weakness in the hegemony strategy. She remembered the stories of how the hegemony had conquered worlds using fear and overwhelming force. But fear could be a double-edged sword. If they could just show the hegemony that they were not invincible, perhaps they could inspire others to rise up as the Myrthany had. Park. Can you get a message out to the surrounding systems? Sarah asked. We need to let them know what's happening here. If we can rally more forces, we might stand a chance. Working on it, Park replied, her fingers flying over the console. I'll try to send out a transmission to any human ships in the area. As Park worked, Sarah took a moment to assess the battlefield. They were still vastly outnumbered, but the spirit of the crew was inspiring. They fought with a determination that she had rarely seen before. It was as if the very act of standing up to the hegemony had sparked something deep within them. Captain, the Valor has taken damage, Thompson called out, interrupting her thoughts, requesting assistance. Redirect our fire to cover them. Sarah commanded. We can't let the hegemony take them down. The Endeavour unleashed another barrage of disruptor fire, striking the hegemony ships that were closing in on the Valor. The crew of the Valor cheered as they received the unexpected support, allowing them to regroup and continue fighting. Meanwhile, Park finally turned to Sarah, a determined look on her face. I've sent out the message, Captain. It's reaching nearby systems now. Good work, Park, Sarah said, her heart swelling with pride. Now we just need to hold the line until help arrives. As if in response to their efforts, a fleet of small human ships suddenly appeared from the nearby asteroid belt. Captain, reinforcements are here, Park exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement, the sight of additional human ships. Joining the fight ignited a fire within Sarah. They were not alone. The spirit of resistance was spreading, and the hegemony would soon realize that humanity would not be easily crushed. Let's show them what we're made of. Sarah shouted, rallying her crew, for freedom, for the Myrthany, for all who have suffered under the hegemony. With renewed vigor, The combined human forces launched a coordinated attack against the hegemony fleet. The tide of battle began to shift, and the weight of oppression was finally beginning to lift. United in their fight for freedom, humanity stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle in the Kepler 442 system had transformed from a desperate fight for survival to a full-scale rebellion against the hegemony. As Captain Sarah Chen and her crew aboard the Endeavour fought alongside their fellow humans, a wave of hope spread throughout the galaxy. News of their resistance reached distant worlds, inspiring other species to rise up against the hegemony's tyranny. In the heart of the hegemony fleet, Admiral Kethver seethed with anger and confusion. The humans had fought back with a tenacity he had never expected. As the Endeavour and its reinforcements pushed against his ships, he realized that this battle was more than just a skirmish. It was a turning point that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. "Admiral, we are losing control of the battlefield," shouted one of his officers, panic evident in his voice. "The human forces are more coordinated than we anticipated." Kethver clenched his jaw. He'd always prided himself on the hegemony's ability to crush any opposition. But these humans were different. They fought with passion and unity, and it was beginning to unravel the carefully maintained order of the hegemony. "Call for reinforcements from the nearest sectors. We must crush this rebellion before it spreads further," he commanded, his voice filled with urgency. Meanwhile, the Endeavour pressed on, the crew inspired by their unexpected success, were pushing them back. Thompson shouted, a grin spreading across his face. The crew shared his excitement, their spirits lifted by the sight of hegemony ships retreating under their combined firepower. "Keep the pressure on," Sarah urged, her determination unwavering. "We need to show the galaxy that resistance is possible. If we can defeat the hegemony here, it will send a message to everyone they've oppressed." As the battle continued, the tide of rebellion spread like wildfire. In distant star systems, oppressed species began to rise up, inspired by the courage of the humans. The Myrthani, previously subjugated, rallied their people and launched their own attacks against hegemony outposts. The insectoid Kitar, long silenced by fear, began sabotaging hegemony supply lines. Even the crystalline collective, known for their pacifism, joined the fight, using their advanced technology to disrupt hegemony communications back on Earth. President Maria Santos watched the news unfold with a mixture of pride and determination. The stories of other species joining the fight against the hegemony filled her with hope. "This is our moment," she said to her advisors. "Humanity must lead the charge for freedom. We must provide support to those who are rising against their oppressors." General Marcus Webb nodded in agreement. "We should send additional ships and resources to assist our allies. If we can coordinate our efforts, we can strike at the heart of the hegemony." As the United Earth Assembly mobilized, they reached out to the various species joining the rebellion. Messages of solidarity and support flooded in, uniting everyone. Under the banner of freedom, Galactic Liberation Alliance was formed, bringing together humans and their newfound allies in a common cause. Back in the Kepler 442 system, as the tide of battle shifted once more, the combined forces of humans, Myrthani, and other species surged against the hegemony fleet. It was a sight to behold, ships of all shapes and sizes fighting side by side, united by a shared desire for freedom. "Captain, we've received reports of uprisings across multiple systems," Park exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "The hegemony is losing control. More ships are joining our cause." Sarah's heart soared at the news. "This is what we fought for. The galaxy is waking up to the truth. We need to keep pushing. Let's target their command ship and take down their leadership. If we can strike at the heart of the hegemony, we can turn the tide once and for all." As the crew prepared for the next phase of their attack, Kethver realized that the situation was slipping through his fingers. He summoned his commanders for an emergency meeting. "We are losing this battle because we underestimated our enemy. We cannot allow this rebellion to spread any further. We must make an example of them." Officers nodded, fear and determination etched on their faces. They understood the stakes. The hegemony had ruled through fear for too long, and now their grip was loosening. Kethver knew that a decisive victory was the only way to reassert their dominance. As the battle continued, Endeavor and its allies prepared for a final push against the hegemony flagship. The crew was filled with a sense of purpose, knowing that they were part of something much larger than themselves. They were not just fighting for their survival, they were fighting for the freedom of countless others who had suffered under oppression. "Let's show the galaxy that we will not be silenced," Sarah shouted, rallying her crew. "Today, we fight not just for ourselves, but for all those who have been oppressed. Together, we will make history." With renewed determination, the combined forces charged forward, aiming for victory. Galaxy had chosen its side, and the spark of rebellion was igniting a fire that would change everything. Together they would fight, and together they would win. In the heart of the Kepler 442 system, the decisive battle reached its peak. Captain Sarah Chen and her allies were poised to strike the hegemony flagship, the Eternal Dominion, a symbol of oppression and tyranny. With their forces united humans, Murthani, Kitar, and many others, the time had come to make a stand against the oppressive regime that had held sway over the galaxy for millennia. "Captain, our sensors show the flagship is heavily damaged, but it's still operational," reported Lieutenant Park, her eyes glued to the readouts. "If we can breach their defenses, we might be able to take it down for good." Sarah felt a surge of determination. "We need to make this count. Let's coordinate our attack with the fury and valor." She turned to Thompson, her security. "Chief, prepare our boarding team. If we can get aboard the flagship, we can take control and end this fight." "Understood," Captain Thompson replied, a fierce glint in his eyes. The crew was ready. They had fought long and hard, and now it was time to finish what they had started, as the Endeavor moved into position. The combined fleet of human and allied ships launched a coordinated assault. Energy beams and missiles arced through space, striking the hegemony flagship and causing sparks to fly. Kethver, watching from his command center, felt his frustration mounting. The rebellion had grown too powerful, and their unity was a force he had never anticipated. "Reinforce our shields. Prepare to return fire," he shouted, his voice echoing in the control room. His officers scrambled to follow his commands, but the damage was already done. The morale of the hegemony crew was wavering. The Endeavor took its place alongside the Fury and Valor, forming a triangle of human ships ready to strike. "On my mark," Sarah announced, her voice steady. "We attacked the main reactor of the flagship. That's our target." Ark nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Weapons are primed and ready, Captain. 3, 2, 1. Fire," Sarah commanded. The ships unleashed a torrent of energy, striking the Eternal Dominion with incredible force. The flagship shuddered as the blasts hit, and alarms blared throughout the vessel. Kethver felt the impact reverberate beneath his feet. "Return fire! Don't let them breach our defenses!" he roared. But deep down, he knew they were losing. "Control," as the battle raged, Sarah signaled to Thompson. "Now's our chance. Prepare the boarding team." With the distraction of the onslaught, Thompson and his team suited up and prepared to board the flagship. "We'll take their command center," Thompson said, determination in his voice. "Let's end this once and for all." The boarding party used a small shuttle to navigate through the chaos, dodging incoming fire as they approached the flagship. "Keep your heads down," Thompson shouted as they landed on the hegemony ship's hull. They quickly disembarked, weapons drawn, and made their way into the ship. On board, the atmosphere was tense. The hegemony crew was scrambling to regain control, and alarms blared throughout the corridors. Thompson led the way, guiding his team through the darkened hallways. They encountered scattered hegemony soldiers, but the surprise attack caught them off guard. The boarding team fought fiercely, using their training and determination to push forward. Meanwhile, back on the Endeavor, Sarah and the crew continued their assault. "We need to keep their focus on us," she said, glancing at Park. "If Thompson and the team can take the command center, we might be able to end this quickly." As the Endeavor and its allies continued to bombard the flagship, the tide of battle began to turn. The hegemony ships were faltering, and Kethver realized that he was losing control of the situation. His forces were crumbling under the combined might of their enemies. "Admiral, we're losing power to the main reactor. One of his officers shouted, panic in their voice. Divert all power to the shields. We can't let them take us down. Kethver barked, but he could see the fear in his crew's eyes. The once mighty hegemony was beginning to buckle under the pressure. Just as Thompson and his team reached the command center, they burst through the doors. Kethver was there, his expression one of fury and disbelief. You dare invade my ship? He growled, his voice filled with contempt. Thompson stepped forward, weapon raised. This ends now, Kethver. Your reign of terror is over. The two sides clashed in a fierce confrontation, but the resolve of the boarding team was unyielding. With the backup of Sarah's forces outside, they fought with everything they had, fueled by the hope of a free galaxy as the Eternal Dominion. Took heavy damage from the assault outside, Kethver's control slipped away. The crew could feel the ship shuddering and panic spread among them. One final push from the combined forces of humanity and their allies sent the flagship into a death spiral. Now, Nera shouted, knowing that victory was within reach. For freedom, the final burst of energy, the Endeavor and its allies struck the flagship one last time, sending it into chaos. The Hegemony flagship exploded in a brilliant flash, marking the end of an era of oppression. As the dust settled, the galaxy took a collective breath. The victory was not just for one species, but for all those who had suffered under the hegemonies. Rule humanity had stood up and fought back, igniting a spark of rebellion that would be remembered for generations to come. Together, they had changed the course of history.